I myself, Devon, I'm one of the account executives here at Descartes. And we also have Tim Regan, who's also another account executive here at Descartes. We kind of specialize in the PeopleVox product and Seller Cloud. And we have a very special guest here today, Justin he's the co-founder of the Aggregate and also co-founder of Seeker Logistics. And we've asked Justin to join us today to speak about the de minimis threshold changes and upcoming changes overall. Justin, thank you for coming today. We'd love to just hand it to you. Maybe you could give us a bit more of your experience.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Definitely looking forward to unpacking what is going to be a seismic change in the global e-commerce world, in case we weren't all busy enough as we already were. My background, basically, as you said, freight logistics, all the unsexy stuff that goes along with delivering e-commerce experiences to consumers. But the last 15 years have been predominantly in the e-commerce space, which has been a very exciting space. And we're sort of growing up with the industry. And so, yeah, formerly one of the co-founders of Seeker Logistics in Australia, and having exited that, set up the Aggregate Co to kind of be an extension of our desire to help see people succeed from a independent advisory. And right now there's a lot of advisory required. So yeah, we're excited to be part of that sort of guidance in the industry, and hopefully we can help people navigate what is going to be a really challenging set of rule changes as it relates to the States.
Thanks very much, Justin. I guess like one thing that is very curious maybe to us and also our customer group is, we just wanted to really get down to why is it so important for exporters in this space. Again, there's a lot of unknown at the moment, but what is the importance here around really understanding what's the de minimis changes will likely mean for businesses in Australia?
Yeah, it's without having the Biden administration's notice of proposed lawmaking change, which is the first step in any kind of change of law in the US. And the Biden administration has got full bilateral support to implement the change of the de minimis. So what is the de minimis? The de minimis is anything under $800 US gets a free ride into the US, no duties, taxes, formal customs clearance, just rolls on through and gets delivered to consumers, both B2C and B2B. So for us, it's like removing that entirely, like we did with Australia, and put rules in place. So there's $1,000 de minimis in Australia, but really that just allows everything to roll through, to be honest. New Zealand has a similar rule, and they've captured it more of a paying tax at a transactional level, not at an operational freight level. The US has a rule in place that is, operational. It's all across the border. And the challenge for them to execute on this is that there are obviously many channels of input into the States, mail, commercial clearance, and express courier. And their big bugbear at the moment is brands like Temu and Shein just pouring 4 million plus parcels under the de minimis a day into that, and just between the two of them into that environment. So that obviously there's evasion of duties, taxes, and to be fair, like the whole industry has been just using this globally now for a long time, and I feel like it's just come to the point now where their foreign trade policy is, but as it relates to the de minimis, it really is going to either completely polar change the way in which Australian retailers deal with the States, or it's going to be an adjustment. And I'm hoping it's just an adjustment, right? Because for brands that are growing, the de minimis is an enormous opportunity to grow into seismic brands and be able to do that comfortably from their Australian headquarters. To then go and put stock in the US is a tipping point, but there's a lot of brands that won't want to do that until they get to a certain point, which is both strategically and commercially a very sound decision to be making. These days, though, because of the de minimis changes, that could really play a huge role in strategy around it. But the de minimis either completely removing entirely and moving to a similar collection model to Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, or trying to capture it at the border through an operational, carrier picks up the duty and recharges back. One way or another, there is going to be a pretty decent change to how we all operate into the US next year. And so timings as well. That de minimis change could happen as early as February, March, but more likely we're expecting Australian retailers to have some level of I guess, impact around from June onwards. I would be very surprised if they moved anything faster than that for Australia. But key now, be prepared. What are those different elements? And I know things are changing. Don't have your head in the sand. Get ahead of it. And there are a lot of brands getting ahead of it right now, which is great to see.
Has there been any indication from the Biden administration of what the new de minimis order value may be changed to?
There's a lot of theories in place. There's a lot of opinion. Anything from going back down to 200 US where it used to be, lower again down to, like, for instance, like a Canada kind of thing where it was $20. Maybe none at all. It really is pretty much hearsay at the moment. There's a lot of the US customs brokerages that do all the clearance work that are saying that it's all a bit of sword rattling to try and, get people to cave on a few bits and pieces. But really, it could go to zero, and there would be a pretty, big change in relation to ecom, because then you're going to have to formally clear every single parcel that enters the US. And that adds huge costs, complexities, back of house stuff with harmonized tariff codes. I really hope it doesn't go there, but it absolutely could. And how we set up our structures and our frameworks and different operating models in preparation of that is just so crucial.
Do you expect the change to be quite sharp and quick, or do you think, from a US perspective, it would be something that would change gradually over time? I guess that's the big thing that a lot of retailers and Australian businesses would expect. There is going to be a change. How quickly is it going to come about early into 2025? But how sharp do you think those changes would come into place? And I guess one other question is, what does that look like? How do they change this? How do they enforce this? And how quickly does that occur?
Yeah, well, there's different theories around how quickly this could get rolled out. So I think the main thought process or theory is that they're just going to try and block China and Chinese-made goods coming directly from China. Now, the interesting part of that is that our intelligence has Temu and Shein operating in the vicinity of around about 26 to 28 warehouses, literally in the last couple of months. So if those guys are taking it that seriously, that they're setting up warehouses in the US, they're definitely getting ahead of what the worst case scenario would be, which is everything pays duty and taxes, all values. So they're already in the process now of formally declaring large chunks of product and setting up the warehouses on the ground. The speed of that work from both of those parties, both through 3PLs and owned warehouses, shows to me that first step of turning China off at the tap, I feel is probably the first thing that they'll do. Trump's also indicated that he wants to put real decent sized tariffs and sanctions in place for Mexico and Canada, but they are primarily focused on sections 201 and 301, and that is your apparel, footwear, consumer electronics, a lot of those consumer goods that we kind of take for granted, and of course are a staple of the export industry out of Australia into the US. So yeah, there is definitely, I feel, a stepping stone change, and China will be shut off first in some way, and then from there, Canada, Mexico, rest of the world will kind of flow on from there. My, I guess, advice to anyone is start thinking about how you prepare for that now, because I can't tell you exactly when things are going to happen. No one knows. Trump's going to come in mid-Jan and can potentially, because he has control over the House and Senate, he could switch it on straight away, or he could take his time, because there are inflationary things and macroeconomic issues within the US that he also has to take into account. And so there's a whole raft of things, but really, I would say Australian companies really should be in the US February, March at the latest. Tie it in with shop talk, do whatever you want to do, but be in the US, kicking warehouses and seeing, are these the kind of people that we could work with? Because when you find out, you could have as little as 30 days to completely reinvent your supply chain. And that's not me like the sky is falling. That's just me trying to make sure people are prepared for any kind of change.
Justin, with this, it definitely sounds like the focus is first on China, but could Australian businesses that are being manufactured, like particularly clothing and apparel being manufactured in China, could they actually end up being part of the first round of changes just because that the goods are actually being manufactured in China, even though they're being exported from Australia?
Yeah, look, there's a really good chance of it, and hence why I'm saying to companies now, when we're talking to them, please have some level of plan. There's about 3 or 4 different models you could look at depending on what your brand does. The other key thing, which is obviously going to take a little bit longer, but should have been started quite a while ago when this noise started, is finding sourcing outside of China. So we've got a lot of brands that are already looking at Vietnam, you know, the old traditionals of sort of India, Bangladesh, and Southeast Asia. But Vietnam's a real hotspot for apparel, especially a lot of Indonesian product as well. And that will get you out of kind of most of that problem around Chinese-made goods. But you're right, Chinese-made goods coming from anywhere in the world inbound to the States, especially through Courier Express and through commercial models where they have to declare every line electronically, are going to pick up on that origin. And I can tell you that there's any clothes that have been declared not Chinese-made are definitely going to get stopped for inspection to verify if they are, you know, Vietnamese or from India or whatever the case may be. So there are, you know, for people who have already outsourced that side of things, there's a bit of a win there. For people that have Chinese-made goods, again, preparation is key. What happens if he just decides, or the Biden administration, followed up by Trump in January, decide, hey, all of China, turning it off for those particular tariff items? That could very much happen. Hard to implement and enforce, but I've seen them make decisions before and then figure it out later on, you know, so we just have to be ready as an industry.
Do you think the states are in a place right now to enforce something like that so quickly, like the infrastructure, the protocols, like the regulations? Is the states kind of in a place right now to make that quick of a decision and enforce it fairly early in 2025?
No, but they probably still could. It is very much a case of we are at their beckoning decision-making process. It could be that fast. That's why we're saying for us, we feel like it's a more of a back half of next year. But that also implies that realistically, you have to be sorting your stuff out in February, March, deploying, you know, June, July, certainly May, June, July before 4th of July sales, and then being well entrenched into new BAU for next year's Black Friday. Those are very real things that could be happening and needing to be done. So, yeah, depending on how it happens, I feel like it's more about being prepared now allows you to pivot further on down the track.
And so then some of the things then you've mentioned, particularly almost worst case scenario, having to reinvent your entire supply chain. Would businesses then need to make sure that they have incorporated and leveraged the right technology to be able to manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's people in tech that are really at core of making this change. The biggest gap in the Australian market, and this isn't everyone, but this is generally everyone, is that the gaps are around buying, merchandising, and planning, and inventory control and demand planning. All of those things with a really good tech stack. You know, there's platforms like Seller Cloud that enable all of that functionality, being able to manage that one place. You know, and there's a lot of inventory products in the marketplace right now. It's really going to be about that back of house structure and setup of managing stock in 2 locations. Now, in the US, people are managing 2, 3, 4, 5 locations in the US with their inventory. That's standard practice. In Australia, most big companies should be looking at setting themselves up in Melbourne and Sydney. And that's kind of seen as very strange and odd thinking. Australia is a very large place, and the States is the same. And inventory, like managing inventory in multiple locations and harnessing the technology that's now available around that is going to be a crucial aspect of, if you looked at yourselves as a business and were like, hey, could I today look at my demand planning? Do I have the tools in the toolbox to be able to go, I can now split my POs at origin and decide how much goes to the States, which fulfills US, Canada, Mexico, which is generally that little setup there that you've got. And I say little, and then the balance comes in rest of the world, Australia, from the Australian warehouse. And, platforms and systems as it relates to fulfillment, to all of the stuff at the front of the funnel, as it relates to product. These are all going to be the new crucial parts of operating a scalable and successful, profitable business rolling into that new regime, and definitely into that new de minimis world.
Makes sense. Probably like one last question from me, Justin, is it sounds like, again, like timing's quite a factor for businesses right now. So like you're saying, probably just getting as far ahead of those decisions as much as you can. What are the key things? So do you think like investing in technology, understanding technology? Do you also think maybe like warehouses? It sounds like, again, if you had to be in the States, warehouse capacity, whether it's like setting up your own warehouse or moving to a 3PL, do you think that that's going to be also quite limited? You'd probably want to get in there first.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I should be buying shares in publicly listed 3PLs at the moment. I feel like it'd be a solid investment. But the real core attributes, and kind of, I always refer to it as following the bouncing ball. So if you start at the top and then watch the ball bounce down towards the consumer, we're looking at, the buying process, technology stacks that allow you to do that effectively. As you flow through, the people that are going to manage that process as well. There's like having people in an inventory space, and there's a couple of great outsourced inventory businesses these days as well. Having people in that space has kind of always been seen as like the last thing you invest in. Really, from now on, it should be like the first thing you invest in. Managing your product, your buying, how deep do you go on certain SKUs, and then you've got that in 2 locations. All that stuff's like super critical. As it relates to getting in and talking to 3PLs, even if you don't have a solid picture around where you want to land, or to your point, there's definitely Australian businesses that have gone into the States and set up their own gigs, and you can transplant your platform, you can take PeopleVox and transplant it into the States in your own warehouse. You need to make your own decisions around that. The biggest learning lesson, and there's a reason why I go to the States 3 to 4 times a year, is because if you're up there, you know what the market's doing, you get all the tips, talk to as many people as you can. Places like, and conferences like Manifest, Home Delivery, Shop Talk, they're all like just perfect grounds to learn, to absorb, to understand what best practices. So getting up there and like having that strategy around that side of things as well, and then making sure you put your stock in the right place. So don't warehouse in Los Angeles. It might seem like that's where 30% of your deliveries are, but it's like setting up your warehouse in Perth. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely companies that warehouse in Perth, but it's a lot cheaper to do it in Sydney and Melbourne from a delivery perspective. So from my perspective, those are kind of the core things. The other thing is around the structure and framework of your business. Do you set up an LLC? Do you operate it as a cost center, as a foreign entity? Both of them are options. Both of them need to be investigated. Look at your tax liabilities. That's why I'm saying like preparation now is crucial to being able to move into a new world. They might end up just putting a transaction fee of like $20 on every order that enters the States. That would probably see most companies probably try and absorb it and just continue business as it is today. But it will see a large transition of businesses move to the States who don't necessarily have that $20 to spare, or just want to get closer to their customers. And that for me is like, start to build out those different parts of the puzzle. But investing in that front end, and like you say, those platforms that enable that ability to like ease and manage things at a macro level, the seller clouds of the world, they're invaluable at this point, and that has to be an investment within your tech stack.
Brilliant, Justin. Well, we really appreciate your time today, giving us a lot to think about, a very good high-level overview on a very in-depth and complex topic. Just for the people who are watching this and would like to speak to you, seek out your advice, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about the Aggregate Code?
Yeah, so you can go to the website and just drop us a contact note on that, which is just www.theaggregateco.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You should be able to find me there. I'm generally trying to drop a couple of bits of content around just planning and stuff on LinkedIn. So even if it's just jump on there and follow, I'm always available for people to get in touch. Let's just have that call. I don't want to see any Australian companies or New Zealand companies for that matter struggle their way through this. A lot of companies do not have the skill set, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a very expensive skill set to have someone like myself or Kai full-time in your business. And the way that we structure things enables us to come into your business as an outsourced COO program, for a lack of a better phrase, and it just help us, get you through things. But even if we're not there in a formal sense, I'm always going to want to help people. So feel free to always reach out via LinkedIn or drop us a note on the website. We just want to see you make good decisions and take everything into account.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Justin. Thanks for your time today. Very important and I guess interesting information that I'm sure a lot of us have learned today. So again, thank you for your time.
No dramas, guys. Happy to help at any time.